Welcome to the Virtual Sanctuary. I am your host and founder of the Virtual Sanctuary, Martina Hagler. Here in the Virtual Sanctuary, our focus is providing the resources, tools, operational, and marketing solutions to expand the capability of the church through digital technology for 21st century discipling. Today in the Virtual Sanctuary, we will expand our conversation and discuss digital innovation and implementing digital technology in the church, what role digital technology will play and should play as we move forward into the 21st, 22nd century church. And as a church, how do you maximize your capacity, your influence, and your work of God and the Great Commission? Research shows that there is a need and an opportunity to bridge the gap between the church and digital technology. And with this digital divide, how do we engage? How do we communicate? How do we communion and disciple? How do we bring our members on board as we navigate this technological change? Pew Research in April indicated that 90% of churches in the United States have closed their doors as a result of the pandemic. That means there are a large percentage of congregants who are not meeting in the four walls of the church. They are having a virtual experience. So please join me and let's begin. Let's explore digital technology and the church. As we look at the current state of the church, particularly in the pandemic season that we are currently in, and us to understand the big picture of cultural trends as they are today. And as pastors, as elders and ministers and leaders of the church caring for souls in this new reality, it is critical for us to explore and to consider and to be tuned in to what cultural and faith trends are emerging. We have been ushered into a season so quickly, a new reality, particularly as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. And today, church looks different. The landscaping of the church that we used to know has changed. We're in a new reality. And the pandemic has exposed some of the opportunities and the gaps that the church has as it pertains to digital technology. And as I stated earlier, Pew Research has stated that 90% of churches in the United States have closed their doors as a result. And so as we look at this new reality, we have to ask critical questions. How do we engage? How do we perform our sacred religious practices? How do we commune? How do we communicate? And how do we disciple? How do we preach and broadcast? How do we collect tithes and offerings? How do we financially support our church in this season? These are some of the pertinent questions that are facing the church today. The pandemic has changed the rhythm of our worship. Yes, it has changed the rhythm of our worship. Our traditional church, as we've known it, has changed, leaving the current state of the church in a gap that we need to close. And so today, as we look at church innovation, we look at several components. One, what has compounded this need? And how do we move forward? We are witnessing a gap in innovation in our churches. It is a gap that is impacting digital formation. It is impacting koinonia, which is our fellowship with one another. And so inside of this gap, it is leaving us with many, many questions. And so as we look at this gap, we have to kind of reframe our thoughts. We have to think about what connectivity looks like in the 21st, 22nd century church. What does future church look like? And we also have to embrace and understand that digital technology is a resource. And yes, it is a tool for connectivity in a virtual space to take our churches into the future. And so as we think about this today, we have to change our mindset. And as Elder John said so eloquently last episode, we have to pivot. Yes, yes, church, we have to pivot into a new reality of how we communicate, and disciple. And so we're excited to have that discussion with you today. And as we transition, I would like for you to welcome our guest today as we talk about digital innovation. Our guest in the virtual sanctuary is Ariane Davis. Ariane is our Director of Marketing for the Virtual Sanctuary. Welcome to the show, Ariane. As we talked about the current state of the church, and we've talked about how the church has shifted, and we talked about the critical need for implementing digital innovation and digital technology in our church, we want to just engage with you today and share some of your ideas and thoughts on how we can close that digital divide as it relates to church today. Help our audience to understand on how we should connect our churches using digital technology.
When it comes to this question, it's important to start out with strategic planning. What is your church about? What do you stand for? There are so many churches within a small area that it's important for a church to clearly identify their values and their mission. This is something that the senior leadership should clearly define and also speak amongst their parishioners. And then if they decide to use any type of digital technology, it must align with their mission. So think about the age group, the demographics that you're trying to attract. And then from there, you can choose the proper technology or platform that best fits your congregation.
Yeah, so it sounds like strategic planning is key. And if I hear you, it sounds like you're telling the churches and leaders of churches that one, we have to assess, we have to approach that very strategically, and we have to evaluate the mission and the vision. And we both know the mission and vision haven't changed. We just need to reevaluate how we utilize technology and incorporate that mission and vision. And sounds like we need to approach it from a consulting standpoint where we're thinking strategically about how we plan to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think is amongst a senior leadership panel or those who are your key decision makers, you're going to sometimes you have different mindsets in the room. So you have innovators and then you have those who are accustomed to your normal practices and they do anything that they can to keep it that way. That may not be the best mindset when it comes to strategic planning. It's either you're going to be an innovator or you're going to maintain and be stagnant with your current route that you're taking. But to have both concepts or mindsets in the room can be problematic. So when you do your strategic planning, be considerate of those you include in the decision-making process. And then also, it's always great to have your outsiders to have perspective as well, but make sure your outsiders are experienced. Don't just have a random individual, just make sure they're experienced so that you can get a broad perspective on the need of the church and the best steps for you guys to take to move towards your goals.
And so it's an assessment. You have to assess the team and leverage the strengths of the team as it relates to your mission and your vision. I love that. And I think inside of that, it's development, right? It's development of leaders. And it's helping us to move our vision, our mission, the word of God, and discipling of his people forward, but staying relevant and having a voice and influence because you're keeping up with the needs and the change. So you have to be futuristic in your leadership approach, would you say?
Absolutely. That is key. And it's hard to do, okay?
Yeah.
It is hard to step out of yourself and become this futuristic perspective or concept that you don't even fully grasp yet. You have to include the younger generation. Educate yourself, surround yourself by people who are in this space so that they can simplify these terms, processes, systems, platforms for you. Don't
Yeah.
try to do this by yourself. It's not easy. And it's very easy also to get misled in regards to what platforms are best fit for you.
Exactly. And I love that you said you can't do it all. It takes a team, right? This is going to be, if we're going to be effective in the 21st century church, if we're going to be able to close that digital divide, we have to understand that it takes a team, it takes all skill sets. So I love that you're saying you have to develop those leaders, you have to assess those leaders and utilize all of those strengths in order to take the church forward. And also, so as we talk about strategic planning, we know that that's key. We also know that leadership development is key. What else would you say is critical to moving forward when you talk about implementing digital technology in your church?
We got to include technology when it comes to spreading the word of God. Digital
Yes.
discipleship is the basis of any decision that we make. As
Yes.
Christians, that is our goal, to spread the word of God. But how do we do that to a broad audience without overworking ourselves and not spending all of our savings to do so? Well, that's where technology comes into play. It not only simplifies the process, but it makes it more economic to do so. So, digital discipleship is another step that your senior leaders should consider when it comes to moving the church forward, including of social media. Obviously, it's a phenomenal way to do so. Now, I know there's other churches that use emails or text messaging as other communication mediums, but social media is a very powerful tool that you shouldn't shy away from. And using it for the glory of God, it's only a greater way to enhance your ability to spread the message or spread the word of God.
Yes, and Ariane, the one thing to keep in mind too, as we talk about social media, there's so many different platforms, but it is a free-based platform, right? And so there are opportunities within social media that we could leverage, especially when we're talking about managing our church budget. So I love that we're talking about this because I think to your point, social media can be a valuable resource and a tool to help disciple. And also, as we've seen, many churches have come on board with live streaming using social media.
Yes, so live streaming is great. There's different strategies to take to be effective in doing that, but live streaming is a great way to build that digital community for your parishioners to be engaged with the current daily activities of the church
Yes.
and then spreading the word of God. So when we include live streaming, you definitely want to maintain your brand, again, the mission and vision of your church, and whatever colors, themes, or things of that nature should match the demographics you're trying to attract.
So, as we talk about moving forward with technology, we've hit on strategic planning, we've talked about leadership development, and we've talked about digital discipleship. And when you think about these, it sounds like you're telling us we need to assess our technology, our needs, and our goals, and what we want to accomplish. So when we think about that, we want to broaden our scope. Sounds like we need to broaden our scope. We can't be so single-minded. And the one thing I want to stress, and I'll get your feedback on this, understand that closing the gap in the church using digital technology is not just about broadcasting a live sermon. It is so much more than that. So when we talk about closing that digital divide and expanding digital technology in the church, when you talk about streamlining church management processes and preparing your church digitally, what would you say are some of the top items that a church should consider when making these decisions?
Well, you definitely want to consider a website. A website is key, especially for search engine optimization. An application, it will be another great step as well, just to make it more convenient for people to engage, find information, and just learn the latest of your church announcements. Then a next thing you can consider is a church management system. And within that church management system, depending on the one you select, you can manage your finances, all of your volunteers, events, and even some of your church services. So your church management systems are key and can also make it so much easier for your senior leaders to manage the operations of the church.
And so, Ariane, when you talk about optimization on a website, What do you mean? Help our audience to understand. If I'm creating a website, what do I need to consider as it pertains to optimization?
When you have a website, you definitely want it to be mobile friendly.
Mm,
Because of the various searches people are making on Google, the number of searches that are done on a mobile device is steadily increasing than the searches that are done on a laptop or a computer. So your website definitely needs to be mobile friendly. In building your website, you also want to make sure that all of your photos are optimized. If you have video or photos on your website that have yet to be optimized in size and color, then it will take a very long time for your website to load. If your website takes a long time to load, it actually also affects your SEO or search engine optimization on Google. Now, search engine optimization on Google is, think of it as when you type in churches found in Chicago.
mm.
There's a lot of listings that pop up. If you're trying to be on top or to be the first search, that is a high SEO or high search engine optimization. So be the top of Google. You want to make sure everything's optimized. Size, your how quickly it can load, your mobile friendly format of your site really doesn't matter. But then also you want to use keywords, words that are commonly used within searches to find, for example, a church. So how do you figure out these keywords? Well, it's actually kind of simple. There's multiple platforms, various ways, intricate ways to do this. However, something that's very simple is go on Google and type in churches near me. Stop right there. Don't press search, don't press anything. You're going to see a drop down of numerous different ways people are searching for that topic, but they're doing it in a different way. Those are keywords that you want to use within your site or within various content to make sure you are optimized and you're more likely to be ranked high.
So if I hear you are, because I'm thinking about technology and everybody might not be familiar with some of the terms you're using.
Yes.
If I'm a smaller church or medium-sized church and I don't have a website and optimization, just in simple terms, what does that mean for me and how do I achieve optimization?
When it comes to search engine optimization, there's numerous strategies you can use. The first step is your website. You definitely want to make sure it's mobile friendly. Nowadays, most people are doing more searches on their phone than they are on their computer or laptop. So once you get a handle of your website, you then want to include your website on various mediums, to include that of social media. Constantly putting or promoting your website and spreading the word and having more people visit your site, this helps with your rankings on Google.
Okay, awesome. So if you're talking about optimization, you're building a website, you want your website to be clean, you want it to be crisp, you want it to be mobile friendly. And in doing so, as you have a developed website, you want to make sure you're achieving optimization by utilizing your website in other platforms such as social media and ensuring you're using keywords on platforms such as Google so that you can come to the top of the search. Is that what we're saying to our audience today?
Yes, yes. Now, this is not a process you have to do on your own. You can hire freelancers and you don't have to pay, $5,000 or anything like that to get a nice website. There are other platforms you can use to find affordable and credible professionals to do the job. Upwork, upwork.com. Upwork is a great site. You can get feedback on any of their past projects and also get customer feedback as to how well that professional did for their particular job.
That's awesome. And so that's what we aim to do here at the Virtual Sanctuary, give you the tools and the resources so that you can begin to expand your capabilities with research and also research using digital technology. So that is awesome. That is a great piece of advice. And so as we think about what to consider We want to consider one, a website. Ariane said it should be clean, it should be simple. In doing so, remember keywords are critical to get you to the top of the searches when people are looking for events, churches to go to, sermons online to view. So think about optimization and know that there are freelancers. As we said, when you assess your team, you may not have all of the tools within your team, but there are other options. And such options are freelancers or people who do consulting that might not necessarily cost as much as you would think, but it's all about knowing where to go to get those resources. So Ariane, as we continue our discussion on closing the digital divide and implementing digital technology in our church, is there anything else that the church should consider as they take these steps to incorporate digital technology into their church?
Well, depending on the demographics of your church, when you transition your church into our digital communities, it's important to consider our parishioners and their thought process. If they're anti-technology, it's very key that we started out with a simplified process and gradually introduce technology to them. Then doing that, you have to be considerate of the church management system that you use or whatever new systems that you implement. Make sure it's simplified. If it has multiple logins or it's just more complex, they have to download multiple apps in order to use or engage, that is not the best route to take. Things to consider is kind of like an all-in-one systems that allow you and your parishioners to volunteer, become members, do their tithes and offering, see the live streaming all at once, just to make it very easy for them to be engaged.
Some of the things that I'm hearing from pastors all over the country that are reaching out to me is, how do you get the older generational cohort to engage in technology? There's a large portion of churches where the congregation is older, and that generational cohort didn't grow up with technology. And so there's many reasons why they're not engaged in the technology, but it is a gap, a hurdle, an obstacle that many pastors are having to overcome. How do you get the older generational cohort to engage in technology? What are some of your thoughts around that?
Well, I think it's important to definitely take a survey, get an understanding of what it is that they're willing to do. Because depending on what part of the country or world that they're in, the response of the old generation can vary. So I would definitely say first take a survey. But then you got to go back to your senior leadership team to figure out, what do you want your older generation to do? Do you want them to just watch sermons? Do you want them to do their tithing and offering? You have to ask yourself, what are the activities or the functionality that we want our parishioners to do?
Ariane, as we come to a close in the virtual sanctuary, we've talked about a lot today. We've talked about strategic planning, assessing organizational needs, evaluating the mission and vision. We've talked about development of leadership and how you can assess your team and develop your leaders to be futuristic leaders for 21st, 22nd century church. And we talked about marketing and social media solutions, and we've touched on a lot. Is there anything else that you would like to share in closing with our audience that you feel they would need to know to help them move forward?
I think it's important that no church attempts to be like another church. God
Mm,
has uniquely ordained you to just be you. So
mm,
stay true to what God has called you. But in the inclusion of digital technology, just understand that technology can just heighten or broaden your reach, broaden your calling of what God has asked or ordained you to do. So don't try and feel the need. You have to have this big platform and $100 microphone and a big old camera. With today's technology, you can do everything you need to do via your telephone. That's how cool technology is today. You can record on your cell phones. You can go to Amazon, get less than $40 for a mic. You don't need a big old crew. There are various platforms where you can edit your own videos. When it comes to your website, there are monthly subscriptions, less than $50. or one-time fees of less than $20 where you can piece your website together. So just take it one platform at a time. Don't need to spend a lot of money, and reach out to people in this space. Don't be fearful of it. Just take the time to learn. YouTube is phenomenal. Keep following us on social media. With Virtual Sanctuary, we provide you tips on various aspects of marketing and operations just to help you continue to think through these decisions, necessary decisions amongst you and your senior leadership. So
That is awesome. That's great advice. And it's critical for churches to understand that you can make strides in the digital world, and it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of equipment.
right.
It's really about understanding the resources and the tools that are available. And I know there are many of you out there saying, I'm not a big church, I don't have a big budget. But what we're saying to you is you don't necessarily need all of that to be effective, to do God's work in the world of digital technology. And we are excited that you tuned in today. And if you are looking for more information, the Virtual Sanctuary is on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, and you can reach out to us. And if you're in need of consultation, or if you're in need of getting further information about how you can connect your church in this digital technology era, we are here to help you bridge the gap in your church for 21st century discipling. It has been an awesome show. And so today, as we talked about expanding your church through digital technology, our guest next week is going to help us understand, as we implement these new technology features, how do we protect ourselves? So we're going to talk about security, yes, not physical security, but virtual security. That will be our topic next week, securing your church in a digital era. Ariane, we thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for sharing. And remember, the mission is still the same. God has commissioned us to disciple. We are here to help you do that using digital technology. Again, I am your host and founder of the Virtual Sanctuary, Martina. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here in the Virtual Sanctuary.